Hello, Poly 100. I hope you are surviving midterm season. You're almost finished, close to the end, and certainly we're getting close to the election, November 3rd. So I want to take this very brief moment to make sure you were all registering to vote, checking your registration status, requesting a mail-in ballot, making a plan to vote. These are all incredibly important things. Be sure to take time to get to that in the next few days. And today what we're actually going to do is take a deep dive into a political campaign. One of the very first videos that I did actually this semester was about an issue campaign. Remember that organizing effort to get the volatile crude oil trains from going through the backyards of Baltimoreans. So the successful organizing efforts that stopped that from continuing. But today we're actually going to take a look into what goes on in the nitty-gritty. I'm going to be pulling on a lot of my own experience. At the end, we have some special guests, alums of Poly 100, who are going to give their perspective into what it's like to be on a campaign at this exact moment. And I want to give a quick shout out. If you are interested in learning the ins and outs of how to run a campaign, every year in the spring semester, the Department of Women and Gender Studies hosts an event called Elect Her. And you can certainly look it up. Be on the look for it this coming year. It's an event targeted to make sure that women run for office, since they are typically quite underrepresented, particularly in SGA, the Student Government Association, but certainly it is open to everyone. So keep your eyes out for that. If it is of interest. All right. A campaign is not a glamorous 9-to-5 job, I can tell you from experience. But when we think about elections, right, these are the foundations of our modern democracy, and a campaign is an opportunity to get behind somebody you believe in. They have obviously great policy ideas, and you want to help them win the election so that they can implement that vision. It is a chance to be a part of something bigger than yourself. I can only highly recommend it. I will also give a disclosure. It is not just for poli-sci majors or poli-sci grads. Anybody can be on a campaign, especially if you're big into computers or computer science or information systems. Big data is a huge thing powering campaigns at the moment, a way to target the voters you want to make sure get out to vote. So lots of opportunities and roles for everybody involved. Now, before we begin today, let's go over a few key terms to be thinking about as I go through the PowerPoints. I want to briefly just touch on here this idea of VAN. That is the online software that is used to organize the voter file, basically the record of everyone who's registered to vote. We'll be going into that a bit more in detail in just a bit, but this idea of micro-targeting, one of our special guests at the end is going to speak about how micro-targeting was very cleverly used in a local election campaign around dogs, of all things. So stay tuned for that coming at the end. But micro-targeting is this idea of deploying ads to specific voters through various forms of media. So either in mailers, pieces of literature that are sent to your house, in sound bites, stump speeches, you name it. All right. So to begin today, what we always say in campaigns is there are 3 scarce resources: time, money, and people. Jury is out on which is the most important. But without people, a campaign really couldn't exist. More so, without volunteers, a campaign couldn't really exist. So volunteers are crucial to the success. But essentially, some of the people that you'll find in a campaign, the campaign manager themselves are going to run the day-to-day operations, the go-to person. They make it all happen. And of course, finance is incredibly important. A finance director, you can't run a campaign without money, unfortunately. Regardless of how noble the cause of the candidate is, campaigns are expensive. I won't touch on this much in this PowerPoint. If you are interested, be sure to look up things like Citizens United, the FEC, the Federal Election Commission for more on that. But today I want to focus on 2 parts: communications and field. The field component of a campaign is absolutely critical, and I cannot stress it enough. Perhaps it was because I myself worked in field, and I know and I've seen the difference it makes. But oftentimes, when you are thinking about candidates, and if all else was held equal, a lot of people will tell you the candidate who actually wins is the person who had a strong field game, a strong ground game. They were out knocking on doors, meeting voters, finding out what the issues were in the community. All right, this is how campaigns build relationships in communities from the earliest days. They are not going 2 days before the election to say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I'm running for election, vote for me in 2 days. No, this is a dedicated, concerted effort to build relationships, build community, like what we talked about in the video with the oil drains in Baltimore. So a field plan is just going to consist of understanding how you're reaching out to constituents. All right, how you're going to use targeted data to be very strategic about who you canvass, the doors you knock on, and who you make phone calls to in phone banking, how you ID or identify your voters, and how you persuade and target maybe those undecided voters to really propel you to a win. You might also have things like voter registration efforts, right? Making sure those in your district are registered to vote, and also a GOTV program, get out the vote. A lot of you might be on the receiving end of GOTV efforts at the moment, making sure that you are, making a plan, whether it's requesting a mail-in ballot, voting early, voting on election day, a very concerted effort, again, from the campaign to make sure that not only are you supporting them, but you're actually getting out to vote. All right, I want to focus, though, specifically for just a moment on communications. Without a strong message that is going to connect with people, the organizing, the field work that you are doing by knocking on doors and making calls is going to be fruitless. Right? Your message is going to be bold, concise, clear, and it's going to establish a link between the campaign and the intended audience. The campaign has delivered a successful message if people feel that their self-interests are connected to the interests of the campaign. You'll get to this idea maybe later on in voter behavior, this idea of linked fates, that we're all better off if we support this candidate. All right, though specifically I want to mention stump speeches, one of our key terms. Stump speeches have 4 really main parts: your who, why, what, and your ask. So your who, give a little bit about yourself. What is your connection to the community? It's a chance to humanize yourself. And then you'll go in and tell a story about the issues you're running on. This is where you'll kind of lead into this idea of laying out your vision for the future. Now, keep an eye out for stump speeches as we move forward with the 20-odd days that are remaining of this campaign. You'll often hear the word we used, this idea of empowerment. We must win. We have the energy and excitement, right? They're going to talk about issues that matter to people, but they're going to do it in a way that people understand, relating their own experiences, talking in plain language. But the we is a very powerful part. And then finally, to round out a stump speech, you'll have an ask, very simple and specific. I need you to vote. I need you to get your neighbors and your family and your friends to vote. Okay? It could be a loftier ideal too. Stand with me, join with me. Together we'll build the country that we know we can be, right? Or something along those lines. A sweet spot for a stump speech is around 3 to 5 minutes. You don't want to talk too long at all. And candidates are going to be using this every day, so they'll tweak it here and there to make it more relevant to the community or the folks that they're speaking with. And then more broadly, when we're thinking about speeches, speeches are for the ear. They are not the most grammatically correct. And one of the most often things that you'll hear every election year is a choice. But this year, the choice cannot be more clear. If you're a bit of a grammar enthusiast, you'll say, yikes, that is not correct. But it's what lands, it's what resonates with people. And I also will tell you that another really important thing to think about if we want to analyze some of the previous debate speeches or just speeches generally is making statistics come alive. So things like if my opponent removes Social Security or whatever the program is, 22 million people will not have Social Security. But if you want to make that statistic come alive, you could say something like, when Social Security is taken away, 22 million Americans will be plunged into poverty. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that is correct or that is a fact, but just to give you an idea of how to make it a personal connection. Never doubt, never underestimate the emotional power of a story. It has swaying power. It's often why you see presidents bring real people to the State of the Union addresses in January or February to kind of give that real person. We're always searching for that elusive person. My neighbor should never have to choose between filling her fridge every week and filling her prescription. Things like that are really going to be important. The ability to inspire people to take action is going to depend on whether the message leaves people hopeful, energized, feeling that their contribution to the campaign will make a difference. And if you're really, interested in political speeches, political communications is a really excellent realm of politics. And certainly President Obama was a wonderful orator who touched on this a lot, and a lot of people say was so effective because of his speeches. All right. Sound bits are another key term to think about. We've heard a lot about them recently, but they're basically short clips from a speech. And the one that sticks out the most to me was from a 2016 presidential debate where Hillary Clinton said, "Trumped up trickle-down economics." It has just always stuck with me, and that's the point. It's speaking to a lengthier concept, but it very concisely articulates the candidate's position on a policy. And you'll be learning a little bit more in voter behavior about how voters' attention span, people generally, most of them, your average voter, the attention span is quite short. And so sound bits like that are incredibly important. They may be prepared ahead of time by the campaign, like Hillary's trumped up trickle-down economics. Now, to get across all of these messages, right, to be an effective communicator, you need money. So in some of the day-to-days of the campaign, I included towards the end that the candidate might have fundraising call time. I don't want to speak too much about this again, but the bulk of a campaign's budget is really going to be allocated to voter contact, which we've established that voter contact is a really important part. Direct mail, radio advertising, maybe paid phone banking, a volunteer operation. Things like direct mail is expensive. But if it's going to deliver the right message, then it's an excellent way to reach voters. Specifically, targeted voters. Just to give you an understanding of maybe the prices that campaigns are facing. Targeted voters should receive anywhere between 6 to 9 pieces of direct mail during the course of the campaign. All right, almost all of it coming in the final few weeks. So there is a lot that goes on. Now, of course, this is all paired with a good field operation, which is what a lot of the day-to-day in a campaign is really about. It gives a campaign energy, gives it a human face, it's going to reflect the campaign's values, and it is just so incredibly important. Now, a lot of people will ask you, why are you actually knocking? What is the point of canvassing? So, democracy is only going to work when large numbers of people participate and exercise their power. So, community organizing, this idea of building long-term relationships, giving people a voice in the issues that affect them, this is all going to come from canvassing. And as they always say, the more personal the contact, the better. Knocking on doors, getting a good pulse for what is happening in the community. When you go and you speak with voters at their door, you knock on the door, "Mr. So-and-so, I'm here today with XYZ campaign. What are some issues that you are facing in the community? What are things that are troubling you at the moment?" And then at the end, you ask for their support. Will you be supporting X candidate in the next election? And this is how you really build a connection, a relationship with the people in the community. So a lot of times people ask you, why are you going to knock on doors? All right. So why knock on doors? I'll tell you why. Because it's incredibly effective. Right? This study here on the side from Alan Gerber at Yale, nearly 100,000 households received mailings in favor of a congressional candidate, and they weren't one bit more likely to vote for the candidate from that mailer. Even though mailers are expensive, they're a way to direct voter contact with people. Knocking on doors requires a little experience, a lot of enthusiasm, and it's going to make the most difference. One thing you'll hear often said in a campaign, yard signs don't vote. The same is true for mailers. Mailers don't vote. People vote. And making that contact with people will be so incredibly important. All right. And I just want to speak ever again so briefly on this idea of technology. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, big data and technology became an incredibly useful tool for campaigns to use. A lot of campaigns are now using what's called NGP Van. You may also heard of it as Vote Builder if any of you are involved with campaigns. It's basically an online database management program that allows us to easily utilize the state voter records which a campaign has paid to have access to in order to mobilize their voters and volunteers. So what happens is when the lady that we see here on the screen was out knocking on doors, what I believe was Bernie Sanders for president, she was knocking on the door, nobody was home. So on her walk packet, which lists all the address, she would have put down just not home, not available. But at the end of the day, once she has finished knocking on all of her doors, she's going to head back to the campaign headquarters and she's going to enter that data into the system, into NGP Van or Vote Builder. Because if it's not in Van, it doesn't exist. You have to keep updating the system every day to make sure things are staying accurate. You want to know if Mrs. Smith is supporting your candidate or if Mr. John is not supporting your candidate, because this will allow you from repeating people who may not support you in the end. All right. And finally, Pizza Anyone. If you're on campaigns, pizza is one of the daily 5 that you'll probably be receiving. All right. But there are just so many ample opportunities to be involved in the political process. And being involved in a campaign is a very deep exposure to that political process, right? Harking back to our idea of federalism, lots of opportunities at the local, state, and federal level to get involved, all right? A lot of times, young people are portrayed as being rather maybe apolitical or politically apathetic, but what I will tell you is a lot of young people are staffing all these campaigns. They are doing a lot of hard work for this greater goal, this greater benefit. All right, so we're going to be hearing from some alums, some Poly 100 and UMBC alums coming up. But I just want to take this moment to say, take time to think about how you want to be involved in the political process. Maybe you love data and you're thinking, this might be a great experience for me. Or maybe after today's presentation, you're saying, wow, I just want to keep viewing this from the outside. But what I will say is, if you want to test out campaigns, things like the Student Government Association, your clubs at UMBC are great ways to test out being deeply involved in something so personal. So I'll leave that there, and I'll let the UMBC folks take over. Our guests give you a bit of a deeper dive as well into what campaigns are like. As always, thank you very much, Poly 100. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all. I'd be happy to share my experience with political campaigns, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, and the very ugly, all for the hope that you realize the immense power we have in the United States to be involved in political campaigns. Take care.